Carla, the Crazy Cross Stitch Lady. Welcome to my craft room. Today I am going to do a how-to video, and so I'm going to show you how to cross stitch with this ever elusive variegated thread. So let's go ahead and get started with that. All right, here we go. I have moved my camera. Actually, I've moved the stand over to the left side of me instead of the right. And I think this is actually going to work a whole lot better where it's really not in the way of my hands moving around. And I wish I had thought of this like 10 tutorials ago, but you know, live and learn, and it's a learning process. So anyway, I hope this video will be a little bit better and the camera won't shake hopefully as much. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the tutorial. So when you're stitching with variegated thread, this is a whole different ball game than stitching with regular thread. And there are some different types of variegation. So let me show you, first of all, this one. Okay, so these are all DMC threads. This is 4077, and you can see there's some variegation. Variegation simply means that the thread, the floss, changes color as you go. This is what I would call a more subtle variegation because you have the yellow and it then kind of fades into the white and then goes back yellow again. So if I unwind it a little bit, you can see where we have the yellow. Let me make sure I'm in focus here. And then it goes white, and then it goes back into the yellow. And it's very subtle. The colors kind of blend together. I am using that for my Serenity-ish prayer piece. I'm using a blue that's a very subtle variegation. So that's that. And then we have this kind of a darker yellow. This is 4075. And it actually, it looks very subtle on camera, but there's more of a variegation here than with this one. This one has just the yellow and white. This one has a mixture of some yellows and some golds, and it's looking really different on camera. But when I'm unwinding it, it goes from the yellow into a darker color and then back. It's still fairly subtle. It's just not quite as subtle as that one. The one I'm going to use today to demonstrate how to do this is this one. And this is 4510. Now, this is some very variegated floss. You definitely can see how the colors are changing here. So if I unwind it, and this also means that the colors change quickly too. So we're going, this tip is orange. You very quickly go to a yellow, and then it goes into an orange, and then kind of a brown color, and then it moves back into orange and yellow and so on. So you can see those color changes pretty quickly. I have already cut off a piece of floss from this one so we can see. Now, you know that I like to do the loop method to start mine. Loop method is if you want to stitch variegated floss, quote, properly, which remember, there are no rules in cross stitch, it's just best practice. So best practice is you don't do loop method, and I'm going to show you why. So here's the piece that I've cut off. I've got some orange on this tip. This is where I cut it. And then it goes into the brown, and then orange and yellow. We're orange, and then going back into the brown again, orange, yellow, and so on. And then this tip has more orange to it going into yellow. So that's how I know that this is, if I start, if I put this one where it goes into the brown, you just have a little bit of orange. If I put that into my needle first, then of course what's going to be stitched first is going to be this part. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to go ahead and take off one strand, and I'm going to do loop method, and I'm going to show you what happens if you do loop method. And this may take a second because let me do this off camera really quick. Put this over to the side and get this in the, I've got a smaller needle than what I usually work with, so it may take me just a minute to get this looped. So what's going to happen is you've got all this variegation, but now I'm going to put it together as 2 strands. Okay, so let me get this threaded. Wish me luck here with my eyes. And so we're going to thread, and hopefully I can get this on the first try, or not. There we go, I got it. Okay, so now let's look at the thread now that I have looped it. Okay, so let's see if it'll do better on, I probably need a white background, don't I? All right, let me pause this video and let me get my white background so you can see this a little better. Okay, so this actually is what I use when I am basting the sides a little bit, just to make sure they don't unravel on me when I'm doing a project, but this will serve the purpose. So if we look, I can hold it up here. Some of the colors actually match. We've got orange and then the yellow, which I'm amazed at. And then as you get to the tip, let me pull this out. Okay, so you see how we have orange and brown together? That's what you would be stitching right there. So this just never happens. It just happened with this particular thread that the 2 ends that you put together, once you put the thread together as 2, it actually matches. I just noticed part of it is not, when it starts to, trying to focus here, when you start getting into, see where it's not matched, where you start getting into the changing of colors, it's not matching. So we're going to stitch with this for a minute just to see what it looks like. Now with variegated thread, you're going to cross stitch just like you normally do. There's nothing different about that. But we're going to try this just to see what it looks like. So let me get this into a hole and get this started. And we're going to see exactly what this looks like. Let me get it through the loop. Okay. All right. Now, let's see if we can see what this is going to look like. Okay, so far we've got 1 X, and so far, you know, it looks the same color. And we're going to get to a mix here in just a minute. So I'm just going to stitch a few X's so you can see what it looks like. It's just really hard to stitch. Let's see, trying to do it where it's not getting out of focus. I like having moved the camera, but it's still a little awkward for me. So let me do just a few more, and we'll see if we start seeing, I'm already starting to see changes here. Well, maybe. So just a little more. Okay, it's starting to look kind of nappy here. As I expected it would. And of course you do the same thing. You smooth your thread out as you're going. Just keep it smooth and run your fingers along it. Okay, let me do just a few more. I'm just stitching like you normally would. one more. Okay. I should have probably started closer to the top of this fabric. I could finagle it a little bit better. Okay, and then there. Okay, let me go under. Okay, let me get it close. See that? Okay, I probably should have used white Ada, but this will be enough to show you. Okay, do you see how on your X's you've got this mix of colors? Looks a little weird, doesn't it? Well, some people actually do this on purpose because this is the look that they want. And some charts actually call for you to stitch with 2 different colored threads at the same time. So you might have, usually they're more subtle. It's like you might have a blue and you might have maybe a gray or a white, and it's to achieve a certain effect. But it's done very purposely. This is what happens when you take a variegated thread and you pull off one thread and try to do a loop, because what you're doing is you are making the 2 ends meet, and then when the 2 ends meet and you've got your threads left, and then you start getting, your variegation gets mixed up together. They don't, excuse me, they don't typically match. And so that's why you get something like that. And that's typically not what we're wanting. Okay, so let me, I'm just going to leave this like this, and I'm going to pull my needle out and just cut that thread off. You'll have to excuse me, my allergies have been acting up, they're so nice to me. And so I probably sound a little stuffy, but that's all right. We're going to be okay. All right, now let me take this variegated thread. All right, so again, we have one end that has a lot of orange and it goes into a yellow. And then the other end has just the tiniest bit of orange and goes into brown. So I think I actually want the stitches to, I'm going to have them, let's see, probably start, I start with having the orange going into the yellow. And since I want that to be those be my first stitches, then I actually need to thread the needle on this end. So what I'm going to do is pull out 2 pieces of floss. And so just excuse me for a minute while I do this and pull this out. And put this thread over here. And we'll get this thread, and then I'll show you what they're supposed to look like. And I have a pretty long thread here. Okay, so now I've got 2 threads and everything matches. Okay. All right, get this picked up. And this tiny needle, I think this is a 26 or 28. Actually, I think it's a 28 because 26 I can stitch with pretty well. I prefer 24. But anyway, okay, so you may be saying, well, all right, so if you can't do loop start, how do you start? Because I hear that question a lot. Well, you're going to start your floss the same way that I used to always start my floss. And you're just going to catch, when you pull it through, you're just going to catch the tail in the back and then make sure that it's secure. And then the following stitches will secure it even more. So I'm going to come up here and might get a better grip on my material here. And so I'm just going to pull till I see my tail. I'm going to leave a little bit of tail, okay? And you're going to stitch like you normally do. Usually, now, I will stitch usually in rows going across. So I'm going to show you across, and then I'm going to show you up and down. Okay, let me get that secured there. Okay. So I'm going to show you what a cross looks like and then up and down, because those are two different looks too. Some people like to go up and down quite a bit. Some people like to go across, but it's going to give you a very different look. And that's the really cool thing about variegated floss. So I'm going to stitch for a little bit and just let you watch how it changes. So we start out with the orange. And I've got quite a bit of orange, but you're going to see it quickly change to yellow. Okay, so we're still at orange. And I'm not going to do time lapse because some people find time lapse photography or time lapse video to be kind of, it makes them a little queasy. And so I'd rather just let you watch me do this for a few minutes. Jean Farish does it some, but she doesn't do it so fast where you get nauseous with it. It doesn't bother me, but I know that it bothers some people. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the orange already. So you're going to watch this turn into yellow. First time I used variegated floss, it was just fascinating to me. Okay, now we're getting to it. I'm just stitching normally. I'm not doing anything different other than when I took my two threads, I made absolutely sure that I used the same, that I started with the same end for both pieces of thread. Okay. All right, now we're really getting into yellow. See what's happening? See, now I'm in the yellow. And we're going to have a little bit of yellow left. And we'll go back into orange. Now, you might say, well, okay, so what do you do if you need to go back across? Well, you go back across. That's all you do. The colors are going to change. It's expected that they're going to change. That's why you're using variegated floss, because you want changes in colors. So typically what I will do, and usually I'm doing letters or something like that. So let's say this is my last stitch for this row and I need to go to the next row. Well, guess what? I'm just going to come down and I'm going to start my next row. And it's starting to change back into orange. Okay. So coming back across. Okay, now we're getting into orange again. See, this one, this end seems to have, let me check, it's got more of like the yellow and orange changes, and then it'll get into brown. So then we'll get into the third color. A lot of variegateds are more of like lighter and darker versions of the same color. Excuse me. And you don't have this stark contrast, but I wanted to use this just so you could see it better. Okay, come on. It's like you got to coax it sometimes. And I'm not trying to railroad or anything. I just want you to see the effect of the floss. So I'm going to go to the end of this row just so you can see the look of it. Okay, there's a lot of orange in that part. Well, if I can hold on to my needle, that would also help. Okay. It's just hard to do this with the camera. Anybody who's stitched with the camera, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just a little awkward. So that's why it looks like I'm awkward. I don't use the sewing method. I don't find that enjoyable. I don't really do it. I haven't really tried it. You say, well, if you haven't tried it, how do you know it's not enjoyable? Well, I've watched people do it, and that just doesn't look appealing to me. I probably should try it just to see if I like it, but I don't think sewing method is going to work with variegated floss just because of the nature of the floss itself. And actually, I think I've heard people say don't do sewing method. You have to do 1 X at a time. You can't do one leg going across and then another leg going back. So I'm going to show you what that looks like too, if you decide to do that. Depends on the look that you want. If you want to go crazy or have a kind of a crazy look, okay. All right, so here we have 2 rows, and that's a very stark contrast. And like I said, you know, excuse my nail here. I have, my nails are looking a little rough right now. But, you know, it's, excuse me. It depends on the look that you want. This is if you really want a very sharply contrasting set of colors. You may want something that's a little more subtle. A lot of people will use variegated floss on samplers or just some designs where normally you might do a monochrome color, but maybe you decide you want to spruce it up a little bit or make it a little different, so you use variegated. So now I'm going to go up and down with this just so you can see what the difference is. So I'm going to skip down a few and go up and down, maybe 5 or 6 stitches. So I'm going to go down. I'm not going across at all. So down, down, down we go. So this one's starting with the yellow. And it will turn back to the orange. They're funny. Listen to me. They're very fun to use. I like variegated floss, but you have to choose when to use variegated floss. It's not something that you're going to use all the time. I like having the variegated flosses. I think I've got just about every variegated floss that DMC has out. Now, some of your over dyes are variegated by the nature of their being over dyes. Because your dye lots vary and they're hand dyed. And so you're going to have a little bit of variegation. But those are typically used when people want just a little bit like it's a very subtle kind of change in color that can really make things look pretty, especially on samplers. People like to use them on samplers quite a bit. So that's really cool. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this one, and then I'm going to go back to the top, and I'm going to go to the second one. Now I'm going to stitch a second row going down. Like if you want to do the side of a house, or, you know, a roof or something like that, where typically you might go across because you want a certain look, and then some people might go down. You're just going to have a really, really different look. So as far as whether to go across or go down, it depends on what kind of look you want. When I work with it, I typically go across. I like the look of that. And then I just go back and forth as I go down, especially with letters. I'll start at the top and then go back and forth like I normally would stitch as I go down. I would get a very different look, and I don't think it would be as subtle if I went up and down like this. As you can see, it's really different. So let me finish these last three. And then I'll do one leg at a time, and you can see why people say don't do one leg at a time. Okay, almost got it. Okay, and I'm going to do one more. Okay, now this is getting into the brown. Okay, now we're introducing that third color. Okay, so look at the difference here. You just get a really different look depending on whether you go across or if you go up and down. And so this, whether you go across or up and down, will depend on what kind of look you want. And it depends on what you're stitching. What do you want it to look like? So let me show you one leg at a time, and I'm just going to do it for 5 X's here. I'm not going to go back and forth, but just do 5. So I'm going to start like right here, okay, right there. And I'm just going to do one leg going across, which is what a lot of people do when they're stitching. They do their first leg and go across. And here we have the brown. Yep. Okay, so going across and across. I'm just doing the first leg. Looks like a tent stitch, which what a tent stitch is one leg. Okay, now let me do a little bit more, because I want you to see what it can look like and why we don't do that. Okay, now I'm going to start going back across. So now I'm going to come back and make my second leg to make the X. Okay, now I'm going back to the left. Okay, so far so good. The first one looks all right. Okay. And second one looks okay. Well, we're not having any issues yet. Okay. Still doing okay. So what's the problem? Well, let's keep going. Uh-oh. We're starting to change colors here. Oh boy, here we go. Oop, there's some orange. Now we've gotten into the orange. All right, let me finish this last one here. Okay, now, what do you think about that right here? That looks pretty crazy to me. This is what happens when you do one leg at a time going across, and then you do your second leg coming back. It's going to change colors on you, and that's what's going to happen. So probably not a good idea. Now, if you're feeling froggy, well, okay, we don't want to feel froggy. Sorry. We don't want to feel froggy around here. We stitchers don't like the frogs very much, do we? Well, let's say if you're feeling gutsy, if you're feeling kind of fancy, or you just want something really different, then hey, go for it. Do what you want. But I just, and then this one down here, I'm just like, ugh, gosh. So these two right here, are going to be what you're probably going to want to do. That's the look that you're going for, is that really nice change in color where both legs of the X are the same color. You know, I think that's, to me, in my opinion, that's the best look for variegated floss. But this is why they say don't do loop method. This is why they say don't do one leg of the X at a time, that you do both legs. And that way, if you do start to change color with one X, it's not as likely to happen, even if you're doing a full X at a time. If it starts to change color mid-X, which sometimes it's going to happen, it is going to just catch the beginning of it, and you're not really going to see a drastic change like that. So that is how you stitch with a variegated thread. If you've never stitched with variegated thread, why don't you give it a chance? Just buy a skein. Don't buy a whole lot, just buy one. And like try to make some letters with it, or make some little pattern, or some, you know, like an ornament or something that's a small pattern. And just try it out, see if you like it. Some people don't like to use it. That's fine. I only use it at certain times. But like I said, the pattern I'm actually stitching on, I'm stitching on the Serenity-ish Prayer right now, and it's I wanted a subtle variegation. I do like these contrasting ones too. It depends on what I'm stitching. So I hope that you have found this helpful, that you now understand a little bit better about variegated floss. And I really hope that if you haven't tried it, that you will. And maybe if you've kind of tried it and you weren't really sure about it, that maybe you'll give it another chance and try it. And so I hope that you are creative and be blessed, and I will see you later. Bye.